Alright guys, HyDra again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Plenty of interesting clips going around last night, especially from the new Blueprint episode from the Toronto Ultra. A few words for Scrappy that he had to say to CleanX, as we discussed a couple of days ago, but also what he thinks of the OpTic Texas team. Of course, the roster that knocked Toronto down to the losers bracket at that event. The thought process being for many of the guys in Ultra that really at Shotzzy making all the plays for this team, even though the scoreboard doesn't necessarily always reflect that. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Firstly, speaking of some of those type of series, Subliners pulled out many Wallbang spots at this event. We remember this one, and actually JP Krez said that these spots will probably not be GA'd. So we'll see how it goes. To be fair, even this spot here is counterable in some way. It's incredible really that Subliners came up with these ideas, and I guess for New York, they have their ordnance gloves things they were GA'd rather controversially the other day, but it seems like the Wallbang spots will remain. However, there is more than they pulled out at the major. Maybe there are some ideas that some teams, possibly including New York, are saving for rather a long time. This, though, is another one here that was shown around yesterday. This is actually Sib here, playing on stream, and well, I mean, what do we even say about this anymore? Here we are losing B point on control, lay down in this spot, bang through this wall and get a free two-piece. So, you know, if you thought defense on Invasion was already rather good, then just get a load of this one, right? And this is one of those spots that I don't believe I've really seen people utilize before. This is like another classic Invasion wallbang type spot, and honestly, to me, this makes me wonder why, like, invasion control should have been removed from the game already with the potential maps we had. And now we're going to be playing this and every team is going to be abusing this to stop people capping B. Sure, maybe you can cap in a different spot, but I'm pretty sure this wallbang lines up to the default contest spot on this point. So that's pretty wild. And I must say I'm pretty surprised that, you know, Sib used it on stream rather than just saving it, let's say, for a match type situation. But yeah, maybe invasion control really has to go now, but unfortunately, that's not the world we live in. Now, Gunless returned to the league yesterday after 677 days, which is pretty crazy to think about. These are, of course, his accolades. You know, 4-time tournament MVP, 6-time major event champion, one of only 5 players who have a winning record against Crim in the grand finals, which is a pretty absurd stat, to be fair. Most kills in an S&D map in a grand finals history, that was, I think it was Dallas, maybe, CDL Dallas, OpTic versus E United back in Infinite Warfare when he had 18 on Retaliation, Search and Destroy, map 5 of the first best of 5 series, before then the second best of 5 series went again game 5 on Scorch S&D, and Karma went 10-0 or 10-1 or something to win the game. If you guys know, you know, but as Gunner says, you know, I'm not even going to read this out, to be fair. I'm just going to let you read it, and I suppose we'll move on from there. The other thing that was talked about on the flight last night was, well, Simp, and effectively what they did, because the matches were rather fast, was go through all of the best players in COD history in their best titles and decide who the best player ever was. Now, FaZe are looking rather good this season, and we'll see more evidence of that in a second, but the winner of the highest player peak ever was actually Simp. Now, Simp knocked out on his way to this point Advanced Warfare Scump, who I thought arguably could have won it. He beat Infinite Warfare here in the finals, Infinite Warfare Formal. Now, I think the flank guys were like, well, we can't really, for the OpTic players, open it to a poll because it'll be biased, and I totally get that. And Black Ops 4 Simp was certainly right up there. You know, there's a few player candidates in mind. There's even maybe an argument that Simp was better in Cold War than he was in Black Ops 4, just because he didn't play the entirety of Black Ops 4. That's kind of why I would be hesitant to do this, is just because some of the other players, yeah, they played the entire season, right? Simp only played, okay, he played a fair bit of Black Ops 4, but it wasn't the entirety of the game, and he was unbelievable at that game. I'm not taking that away from him, but I feel like over the course of a season, you can argue that his Cold War year was actually better in some ways, but, you know, obviously part of that was online, bit of a different story. But Infinite Warfare Formal, I thought could have won it. Advanced Warfare Scump, I thought could have won it. Ghost Crim 6, I thought could have won it. There were a few candidates. I think personally, I'd have had Advanced Warfare Scump over Black Ops 4 Simp, and therefore Simp would have been knocked out earlier, and then it might have been a Scump Formal final T2P. I don't know. But that's what they came up with in the end. I will say, speaking of that Cold War season, that after 24 series of the year so far, the Cold War FaZe team and this year's FaZe team are doing rather similarly. Back then, they had one major win against Empire and one second place against Ultra after 2 majors. Now, both of those were online, but it is what it is. And this year, they have one major win and one second place so far, ignoring the kickoff. And back in Cold War, they were 20 wins, 4 losses at this point. This season, they're 20 wins, 4 losses. So in Cold War, FaZe were the most dominant version of FaZe we have seen and the most dominant team we have seen so far in the CDL era, winning winning 4 events out of 6, including the World Championship. The question is, sure, their online record still maintains to be incredibly good, but can they replicate that level of performance again? Is it possible for a season like Cold War FaZe to actually happen today? I think it's possible, but I do think that back then, you look at the teams that they were competing with, they weren't as strong. Like, Toronto weren't as strong as they are today. Subliners certainly weren't as strong as they are today. Even OpTic Chicago back then weren't an especially good team despite the name power they had. Their real competition was Dallas Empire, but they had, a few hiccups really. So I think you look back at the season, you think, well, there was no one really particularly capable of competing with FaZe apart from Nicky D Classic when he was on Surge for that brief period at Major 5. So maybe that is part of the reason why we see what we see here, and it seems doubtful to me that FaZe will be able to, replicate the amount of event victories they had back then and the dominance they had back then continuing onwards, because the top end of the league I do think is more competitive now than it was previously, but still, gotta be mentioned, they're on a good run, and the amount of, this is a ridiculous stat to be fair, this is the amount of times that FaZe have been swept, 8 times, which is, more than I would maybe have thought, but to be fair, in CDL history, not too bad I suppose, especially because these other teams, like Heretics, have already been swept 6 times and they've been around for half a season, so kind of puts things in perspective. FaZe though have 58 sweeps, so that is more than anybody else by quite some way. OpTic have 43, which is the second most, and I guess that is combining OpTic and OpTic Chicago and this type of stuff, and maybe Huntsman is not included in that, not exactly sure. But I've got a couple of clips to share with you guys. Firstly, one of which from this man Cellium, another clip from that Pred episode, Esports episode with Hex yesterday. And it also got to be mentioned that despite the fact that Cell isn't really too much so in the MVP conversation this year, people are talking about Scrappy and for good reason, people are talking about Simp and for good reason, but in terms of KD, Cell is doing it again. I mean, look at these numbers for the season so far. Despite having, even by his standards, maybe a rather underwhelming Major 2, they still won the event. There's been talk about Playstyle as a result, but I gotta share a couple of clips here. Certainly this one between MC and Pred, but also what Scrappy and the Toronto guys have to say on the OpTic team that knocked them down to the losers bracket at the Major.
Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god.
Yeah, for the stage, yeah.
We lagging? We lagging?
You just want water, right? In the bottle?
Cry me a river.
No water.
Cry me a river, you're even f***ing worse.
Bring it around town.
Karachi last P1 as well, I f***ing rushed it, man. I rushed the top line to help you in hill when I should have gone right.
Oh, there are 3 going B and then 1 just camping a corner. A is in the or ball, and then they'll just run to the point. So in our head, we think they're just gonna go camp the point. Their whole game is make fucking shit so hectic that people don't know how to fucking react.
It's just Ant. The only person that makes plays on the team is Ant.
The first round
you were like, yeah, I'm gonna run at this guy.
I had him so much.
What a shit play.
And then I'm literally laying in front of bro, it was so dog shit.
No, I tried to shoot Ant. He was doing the stair glitch left side dark.
I didn't even know that was a ledge, bro.
You were both one shot.
Yeah.
When he got top 3, I should have stayed low coop, but I came back towards time, went top sure. So.
If we, bro, and I read it, but I knew they were pinching that shit. Pinching tunnel, it was the easiest route ever.
They actually had an unreal break off as well. Until we ran in and got fucking free.
It's just somehow they play
I just in the aisle and I just went to the bathroom. I was I was pissing, and MC comes right. There's 6 free aisles, and MC comes right next to me. He looks at me. He goes, "Nice cock."
No,
I swear.
no.
As we're about to play, and I just started laughing, man. MC's fucking hilarious. Too.
I would have looked down and I'm like, yeah, right.
I looked at him.
This is my favorite part.
This is a hilarious clip as well here from Scrappy, because we saw him mention this on the Toronto podcast they did the other day, that they'd slammed Ravens 250-17 in warm-up scrims, and then he went over to talk some trash and Clay wasn't very happy with him. And that is, obviously exactly what happened. We see the clip right here. So Scrappy's like, oh my God, these guys got slammed. He gets up and what he says to Clay. I mean, I'd be fuming if I was Clay. We're lagging type thing. Oh my God. This guy is built different. I can understand why Clay was not so happy with him. And then of course Scrappy fires back. there some beef before the season even began, and that doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon. TJ then replies and says, no BS, I think that was the only map that they won. Not sure I believe that fully necessarily in the warm-ups that they did, but yeah, Toronto were clearly slamming here on this Rio hardpoint in the warm-up scrims against Ravens, but couldn't really have the tournament run they were looking for because they were knocked down to losers by OpTic. They then took down Los Angeles Grillers emphatically, so then they went out of the tournament to the Subliners, who ended up then losing to OpTic again before we know what happened in the grand finals. So this was in, honestly, the production quality here I think is mega, what the Toronto guys do nowadays. It's fantastic to see how this the show that they make, the blueprint, is elevated over time, and the storytelling is fantastic. But also just all those behind the scenes insights, which are just great to see that you don't always get from the more public facing angle. So I thought it was just interesting what they had to say really on the OpTic team, because clearly frustrated with the way they lost at that point, feeling like they could have and should have played better, but just giving lots of credit to Shotzzy, right? And I think this is what's interesting about the way that players perceive Shotzzy compared to how it can look from the outside world. I think it's quite clear that, you know, they believe that Shotzzy's just the one making the plays. He's the one being annoying. He's the one making the impact on the map, even though the stats don't necessarily reflect that. This was that series, by the way. They lost both hardpoints here. Toronto on the Karachi, then on the Skid Row. Shotzzy finished with the lowest damage on his team and, you know, the lowest KD on his team as well with a 0.96. But that clearly, in their mind, does not reflect how valuable Shotzzy was to the play. And this is the thing that, you know, is not going to show up on the scoreboards. And this is the reason why there's certain players in the league that, whatever the fans and the general community perception might be, which obviously is high and good for Shotzzy, but, you know, whatever that, let's say a player like Slasher, for example, or even Arcetes to some degree, but I think that may have changed nowadays, was a player, and I think Slasher is also falling into this category, that the pros know, like whatever the fans think, the pros know that they're good, or at least that is the general perception of the pro players, that they're really valuable assets. There's certain pros that you might think, well, damn, how are they keep getting spots again? Like Standy keeps walking back into spots, it seems. Same with, you know, Asim is a good player. Like these players I'm mentioning are certainly CDL caliber players, but there's a lot of CDL caliber players, some of which aren't in the league, right? Because that's just how competitive it is in the league at the moment. But there's certain players you think, wow, why are they, you know, getting another spot again? But that's just because the pros rate them and the pros feel like, from what they know, they are talented assets. And the same is true of Shotzzy, but like to an entirely different level, you know, like obviously people rate him very highly and clearly for very good reason. Whether that's going to be enough to take the next step is a question. This is how the league standings look at the present day. Toronto play today, OpTic play tomorrow, as we'll see in just a couple of seconds. FaZe though, number one in the league as it stands, then Toronto, then OpTic, then the Subliners. Gotta say though, Vegas Legion are now officially, after their victory yesterday, 5th place in the league. It seems at this point, nigh on guaranteed, that Legion will make it to the World Championship, right? That's how it seems to be, at least. The way they're trending, the fact that teams below them are significantly worse, it looks like Vegas to champs is a very viable prospect right now, and they've officially overtaken Minnesota Rocker as the 5th best team on the standings in the entire game. They don't play again today. They do, however, play relatively soon. These are the games of today, though. So Gorillas, they play Ultra. That was that losers bracket game that Ultra just smoked them in pretty much. I think it was 3-1. They lost the search, but the respawns weren't close to knock them out of the tourney. So expecting Toronto to get a nice victory here, especially because Gorillas don't tend to shoot back online, as we saw yesterday. Then Boston Heretics. New series for both the Boston and the Miami teams. Beans is back in the Boston team, as is Pentagram for the first time. We'll see if Doug's words and all the drama over the last few days comes to anything. I think that I would take Boston to win this series, and I do think they'll get better. I just don't think they'll get better enough, necessarily, with the changes they're making. Miami, they've dropped ErikBooM. They've brought Real into their team, we believe. So, yeah, hopefully that goes well for both parties. Really looking forward to that one. And then Rocker. This, I think, is a more of an interesting test, because the Subliners, I think, will probably beat them, maybe relatively comfortably, just because of the way that New York dominated last stage online. Like, they were really, really strong online, New York, and I don't expect that to change. And Minnesota Rocker, they've just got slammed by FaZe. They're now playing another top 3 team in the game, at least based on the most recent major. That's where Subliners play, so it's going to be hard, but this is where Rocker need to show something to me, right? Against FaZe, it's like, you know what, you can get slammed by FaZe online, that can happen to anybody, but against Subliners, I think you've really got to at least show some promise here from Gunless and from Standy and those guys that have made the move. So very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.
How you doing? How you doing? How you doing? Yo, Tony. I don't know. I was just smoking the papaya. Hey, how you doing? You know what I'm saying? How you doing?
It's actually pretty good.
No, I appreciate it. Come on, Kicks.
Actually, is pretty good.
I appreciate it.
Pretty good.
Yeah, you like that, Tony?